All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry that I'm a little bit late. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Excellent. Yep. Just a little bit late because I was taking care of a little email situation that I got, which was a little important. So sorry for that. All right. Let's share the screen. Oh, okay. Okay. Good. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry that I was late with uploading that too. Sometimes it's a bit tricky uploading video files to Brightspace, but I was able to get it all done yesterday. And the other one is also up, which will be oh yeah. I fixed that deadline. It's due at 11:59 p.m. tonight. All right, so let's get started. There we go. Slow computer. So, astrology and horoscopes is probably the topic that I see received the most, I'll call it advice about. I was working with a student as part of the Students as Partners program to sort of do a little bit of a revamp on this course. And unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to revamp the slides here today too much following my student suggestions, but I do hope that the discussion is sufficiently revamped. Whoops. Now, obviously, hopefully you've already seen this episode. If not, you can watch it afterward. It's not a big deal. But my plan for today is to explain some of the things about astrology and horoscopes that are not covered in the episode of Cosmos, which you will have or will later watch. The point of watching that episode, by the way, was not, of course, not the debunking of astrology, but that sort of showing you that how science makes sense of the world can still be kind of awe-inspiring rather than cold and scientific and stale, right? So that's kind of the point of that, and that's where I'd like to focus the the discussion later on. So I guess before we launch into it, astrology is also, by the way, one of the most widely believed, widely practiced paranormal things, right? A lot of people believe in astrology. A lot of people consult horoscopes. Back in my day, it was commonly newspaper and magazine horoscopes. Of course, now a lot of this stuff has moved online, so that there are websites and apps and so forth where you can read your horoscope. So I guess I'll put my feelers out there. Who has consulted a horoscope recently, for example? Okay, Taylor has. All right, perfect. So at least one of you. And Sydney, how about you?
There's like the CoStar app, which I've used.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that one. What's
Yeah,
that
it's like a
about?
really popular. It's probably like the leading app for astrology, and everyone has it. So I downloaded it. It's kind of fun.
Oh, wow. What do you make of it?
I mean, I don't know if I like really believe it. And there sometimes I'm like, oh, that's kind of accurate, but
Yeah,
who knows?
it's kind of like, oh, it'd be interesting to see what it says, sort of thing, right?
Like I would put my full chest into it, but like it's fun.
Yeah. And yeah, a horoscope. Yeah. Should do that. What would a horoscope look like? Well, if it looked anything like a horoscope, it would be something like a star chart that's supposed to tell you something, right? Which is what I'll get into explaining here shortly. And by the way, we probably won't go as long today as we usually do, because I have to go to the dentist, which is fun. So that'll be that's something that I have to do, but whatever, you got to go to the dentist. So okay, so astronomy is different from astrology. Of course, I think understanding this difference is very important, and understanding where the differences began to occur historically. Yeah, exactly. You will have a dentist appointment today. Yeah, I have to have a tooth pulled. But you know what? It's really no big deal. They give you the needle and then they pop it out. No big deal. Okay. So the differences between astronomy and astrology, they weren't always different, mind you. Astrology and astronomy used to be very much the same thing, as Sagan tells us in Cosmos, right? Similar to how there really used to be no difference between alchemy and chemistry. Chemistry was the science that emerged out of alchemy, which we now know is a pseudoscience. A similar thing goes for astronomy emerging out of astrology. Astronomy, by the way, comes from the Greek word for star and the word for order or law, which is nomos. So astronomos, the order of the stars or the law-like relations of all the stars and the planets. That's astronomy. And what astronomers study are celestial phenomena. So we're talking planets, stars, galaxies, nebula. Of course, there are planetary astronomers that emphasize the planets and the asteroids and the comets and so forth. There are radio astronomers that study the cosmos using radio telescopes, right? There are lots of different branches of astronomy, but they're all interested in studying celestial phenomena, meaning phenomena up in the sky. And it emerged as a proper science during the scientific revolution, which began with Copernicus. Copernicus and his publishing of his heliocentric theory of the solar system, where the sun, not the earth, is in the center. The scientific revolution is taken by historians to have ended with Newton's publication of the Principia Mathematica. But that's the scientific revolution in Europe. It's not like nobody was doing astronomy or astrology. Before the scientific revolution in Europe, in fact, during the what we call the Middle Ages, what used to be called the Dark Ages, astronomy was really big in the Arabic world. So in the Middle East, in the home of Islam, if you were in, say, Baghdad in modern day Iraq, you might be lucky enough to visit the House of Wisdom, which was like a university, like a big research institution, where new research was happening, where translations of old Greek texts were happening. It was a really very like an enlightenment or a scientific revolution, kind of like on its own, in its own right. And of course, they did a lot of astronomy there as well. And of course, they had borrowed not only from earlier Greek thinkers, but from Indian astronomers, Persian astronomers, all kinds of places, right? Why have ancient peoples been so fascinated with the sky and with the movements of the stars and the planets? What do you think, and what does Sagan have to say about that? Boredom. I mean, boredom might be part of it. And yeah, I mean, there, like Isaac says with tea leaves, that's a form of divination, right? And that's what astrology is too, essentially, like reading tea leaves or reading palms. It's a form of divination. So, yeah, they did try to predict stuff. Yeah, like Conrad says, the weather, more so the seasons, as you say, exactly. Yeah, a sense of peace from recurring patterns. Yep, harvesting food. Exactly. Basically, well, now we do, Carol. Now we certainly want to explore outer space. But in the past, I think people were more concerned with sorry, email stuff. Actually, can you excuse me for 1 second? I need to take care of something real quick. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. It's all to do with the new job, you see. So it's very important. So yes, you're all gesturing at the right answer. It was important to know. It was important to know when things were going to happen, right? And before we had clocks, the way we reckon time was by looking at the sky. And I'm talking like pre-sundial, like before sticking a stick in the ground and watching shadows too. Before that, that is how we keep track of time. Oh, congrats, James. Nice. Yeah, this isn't for an interview. It's for I've signed everything. It's just no one seems to have received it. And there are deadlines involved, and I'm kind of like, what the heck? Right. So anyway, that's not really anyone's concern today. So where was I? Right. It's important to know when things happen. And think about it. Think about calendars, for example. Some of you might be familiar with lunar calendars, right? Anyone? Mm-hmm. Sydney, go ahead.
Pretty sure the Jewish calendar is based off of the moon, because I know like all our holidays are at different times. They're close together, but every year it's slightly different.
Yeah, exactly, right? And yeah, like Adam says, the Islamic calendar is also a lunar calendar. Yep, James, yep. Yeah, basically like a lunar calendar where a month is pretty much the length of the time it takes to go from a new moon back to a new moon, right? Which is slightly shorter than a lot of the months in our calendar that we use now, which is a solar lunar calendar, not just a lunar calendar. So yeah, but that's why the holidays, for example, in Judaism and Islam, they kind of move, and that's because they are lunar calendars. And our solar lunar calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar, compensates for that, so that the holidays are fixed on particular dates rather than particular moments in the moon's phase, right? So that's why you see that difference, perhaps, if you're Jewish or if you're Muslim, why the Ramadan moves around, basically, or why every year Hanukkah maybe is on a different date. It's because the lunar calendars, right? Things kind of float around in a way that they don't with the Gregorian calendar. But that, I think, kind of emphasizes what I'm trying to say, right? There are ways of keeping time. And of course, these calendars, they don't just come out of nowhere. They're based upon what the moon does, right? What phase is it in? That's how we know what time of year it is. So yeah, that's why it was important to do this. But what about astrology? It comes from the word star, astra for star, and then logos from, logos has a lot of meanings, but it could mean reason, logic, the true speech, or in this context, the study of. Now, these were the same discipline, again, as I said, until the scientific revolution. The two disciplines started to diverge. And the roots of astrology really go back to the roots of the same calendrical systems that our distant ancestors developed. But presently, astrology is regarded by astronomers as a pseudoscience. Why? Well, because, as I said, it's a form of divination. It tries to divine information about your life from what the stars and planets and so forth were doing, what positions they were in the moment you were born. And I want to note that I'm focusing on so-called Western astrology, right? And this originally developed in Mesopotamia. It eventually spread to Greece, Persia, from there to places like Rome, and eventually the home of Islam, and finally up into Western Europe. There are other older astrological systems. For example, there is Chinese astrology. In Western astrology, your zodiac sign is based on the month that you were born, of course. But in Chinese astrology, you may have a zodiac sign that's based on the year that you were born, right? So that's one difference, for example. And there are differences between the Western systems and Indian astrology as well. Now, I do not know about those astrological systems, so I'm going to really try to not say too much about them. Yeah, year, month, day, time. Okay, thank you, Carol. Yeah, so that's so the year is the more important thing, right? Yeah, the twin thing, exactly. It was a good thing. Was a problem for astrology, exactly. So yes. So yeah. We'll talk about yeah. So not quite a year, but as Carol says, a year, then a month, then a day, and a time. A lot of besides when we say as a North American person, and I say, oh, I'm a tiger because I was born in 86, do I really know what I'm talking about? Not really. I mean, a lot of how, for example, Chinese astrology gets to us in the West is because it's been kind of appropriated, right? So and that's why I'm not gonna talk about it, because I don't know, right? And I don't want to misrepresent it. So So that's why I'm sticking to Western astrology, right? Now, astrology is no longer considered a science. It used to be. It used to be a part of what we could call natural philosophy, but it's really a kind of divination. So what is divination? Well, it's using some means of gathering information, usually about people, about yourself or someone else that you care about, for example, from a divine or supernatural source. And it includes other things like dowsing is one. Dowsing is where you take your sticks. Sometimes it's two L-shaped rods. Sometimes it's a Y-shaped stick. And you go and find water because the stick bends when there's water, right? Of course, when we do controlled double-blind tests, we find that dowsing is actually a result of the ideomotor effect, which we learned about last week. Tarot card reading is another form of divination that's quite popular. After all, you can go into bookstores, right, and buy your deck of tarot cards. I went into the bookstore the other day for the first time in a little while, in fact, and I was very disappointed in the philosophy section because it was basically their New Age section. And right beside where the Socrates and Plato and everybody should be, it's packs of tarot cards. So that's kind of a bummer. But anyway, how do we divine information, or how are we supposed to divine information about a person in astrology? Well, some of this Sagan discusses, and some of it he does not. So, one thing that he mentions is that we used to think of the planets as gods. And that's probably hasn't been that way for quite a while, actually. Sure, back in the day, in the age of myth, or in the Stone Age even, people may have thought of the planets as gods or godlike beings. By the time we get to the ancient Greeks are already past that. Even well before the classical period, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the Greek scientists were starting to try to figure out how the natural world worked. So it was no longer believed that, the gods were literally real and that they controlled everything, right? They were starting to divest themselves of that. But maybe the planet still held some kind of influence on people. Possible, they thought. In any case, planet comes from the word planetos, which means wanderer, and that's because of the retrograde motion that planets show throughout the year. So stars go around the celestial pole, but otherwise they don't really move, right? The celestial North Pole, if you know how to find the star Polaris, then you can observe throughout the night that that stars will just kind of orbit around the star Polaris, which is kind of pointed up at the North Celestial Pole. If you want to find Polaris, I think it's the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. So if you're familiar with that constellation, you can find the northern star Polaris. Go outside, you'll see the constellations where they are. Go outside a few hours later and you'll see that they've turned a bit, right? And planets rise and set just like the sun and the moon, and you can see a number of them from Earth. Yeah, you have to go outside, unfortunately, to do this, or you could use one of those cell phone apps, and you could do that through. You don't have to go outside for that. You know those ones, sky maps. Those are cool. So planets also rise and set, but if you look at the motions of the planets, where they are in the sky throughout the year at particular times, you notice something weird. You notice the retrograde motion. So throughout the year, The planet's going do. So one night it's here at this time, another night it's here at this time, so on and so forth, boop, 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 until it loops back and does like this sort of loop-de-loop and then goes back on its way throughout the year. Again, this is not something that you'll see like on a quiet summer night. The planets just don't move that fast. I mean, they're moving incredibly fast, but the solar system is huge. So that's retrograde motion, and that's something that astronomers observed throughout the year, right? And we'll talk about how they were able to do this without telescopes in a moment, right? But yeah, the planets are wanderers. And most of the planets in our solar system have god names, which I think reminds us that perhaps in our distant past, we would have thought of the planets as gods or godlike beings. The planets in our solar system are primarily named for Roman gods. So Mercury, well, Mercury is an exception. Mercury is a Greek name. But then we got Venus, Roman, Earth, Roman, Mars, Roman, Jupiter, Roman, Saturn, Roman. Then we get to Neptune. Or wait, no, next is Uranus. That is a Greek name. And Neptune, Greek name. Pluto is a Roman name, but Pluto's not a planet anymore and hasn't been for some time. So we're not going to talk about Pluto. That's right. We don't talk about Pluto. Now we can talk about Pluto. People are still mad about that. I don't know why. Let's see. Boom. Yeah, people are mad about Pluto being downgraded. I wonder why. Maybe we can talk about it. It will always be a planet. I'm okay with it. I'll tell you why, because there are like Kuiper belt objects that are larger than Pluto that don't even have proper names. They're like comet number 87. You're right. Yeah, James, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I don't quite remember much about the detail. I know it was one of the when it was a planet, it was one of the last planets to be discovered because it's so small and so far away.
Yeah, I could talk about it real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so it was like Newton or whoever, they made the math equations that predicted gravity. And then they examined the solar system and they were like, "Oh, this is pretty good." And then I don't know what year it was. I think it was like the early 2000s or like the 90s or something. There was like a young guy. He was like 20. He was in university and he was examining the sky and he was comparing it to the Newton's equations and he realized that it's off by like a really small factor. Like he's like, "Oh, there must be something farther in the solar system that's making the planets act up a little bit." And he did the calculations. He said, if it's off by this much, then there should be an object exactly here that weighs exactly this much. And so they pointed the camera in the sky, and this 20-year-old using math found Pluto.
Nice. Yeah.
So it was like a confirmation that the gravity constants were correct.
Yeah. I think it happened a little earlier than the 90s.
Yeah, long time ago. 30s, this guy says.
Yeah. But you're correct. Like, yeah, we inferred the existence of it before we observed it. And that's how science works, right? That's how actual science works. Notice how this is actually very germane to our purposes because we're talking about astrology as a means of predicting things. And here we are with our science going, okay, so according to what we know about how the planets move, the planets should be moving like this, but they're moving like this. So how do we explain that? Well, there must be a massive object out there with gravity affecting everything else. Let's go look for it, see if we can find it. And that's what happened. That's actual prediction, right? That's what science can do for you. I think that's kind of cool. Okay, so yes, planets and moons have names from mythology, mostly Greco-Roman stuff, but as we find more and more things, we give them other names. So, most of the planets and their moons are named after Greek or Roman mythological figures, but we've got some asteroids and some comets that have they could be named after the people that discover them. They might have names from the Norse mythology. They might have names from Hindu mythology, right? It depends. Most of the stars that we can see with the naked eye, incidentally, have Arabic names. So I'm talking Aldebaran, Sirius, Betelgeuse. Yes, Betelgeuse. It's not spelled like Beetlejuice, but it's pronounced Betelgeuse. Rigel. These are all Arabic names. Why? Well, remember, during the Islamic Golden Age, so much astronomy was happening. And if you discover the stars, you get to name them. So the Arabic astronomers were like, you know what? We're naming these because they were the ones doing all the cataloging of the stars and stuff, right? And yeah, why were the planets wanderers? They move differently from the stars. They exhibit retrograde motion. Now, let's see, how are we doing for time? We're doing pretty good. So a few things that you'll want to know about how astrology is supposed to work. You're going to need to know about these things here. Astronomers make use of the celestial sphere, but so do astrologers, and even navigators used to make use of this before the advent of GPS systems. So what is the celestial sphere? Well, the celestial sphere, think of it as like if we had made a globe out of the night sky. So you can see here, here's the Earth, and here's the celestial sphere, which is the night sky as it appears from the surface of the Earth. So it's like a 3D map of the sky. Earth is at the middle. Earth turns on its axis, right? And the stars, because we are turning, the stars appear to rotate around the north and south celestial poles. And it just so happens that Polaris, the star Polaris, is right around the north celestial pole. So if you can find that, you can point your camera at it, and you can see one. You can get a long exposure shot of some star trails and watch everything go around the celestial pole. So this is the celestial sphere. Now, why would this be important for navigation, for reckoning time? Well, it's because of the regularity of how things move. One important way things move is along the ecliptic and along the celestial equator. So remember, let's just go back for a sec. So here's our north celestial pole, our south celestial pole. You'll notice the Earth is sort of tilted. Yeah, exactly. The North Star was basically a compass for ancient people who lived in the northern hemisphere for thousands and thousands of years. For that exact reason, it doesn't move. One of these one day, one of our ancient ancestors, or perhaps this happened many times independently in little pockets of civilization, but somebody would have been looking at the sky going, those stars go like this, but this star doesn't. Might be important. Let's remember that. And they did. And yeah, now you can use that as a sort of compass. You know where north is if you can find Polaris. You also know how far north you are if you find Polaris. For example, if you go outside and let's say you have a sextant, right? Like one of those old-timey tools. It looks like a telescope with a protractor on it. You might see sailors and pirates and stuff using them, right? You could figure out how high up on the horizon, from the horizon, Polaris is. So looking at the screen here, you know, if this is the horizon, and so say my horizon, actually that's not a good idea. Just think of it like this. You point your hand out at the horizon, and Polaris is like, I don't know, that high up. That angle is how far north you are in degrees of latitude. So in Ottawa, I think we're something like 45 or 46 degrees north latitude. And if you have a sextant or just want to use your protractor, you can go outside, find Polaris tonight, and you will see that it's at the same elevation in the sky as we are latitudinally on the Earth. So that's just a little trick you can use to figure out how far north you are if you ever need to in latitude. You know? Okay. So you're going to need to know a few things. One is the ecliptic. This is the path that the sun traces against the celestial sphere through the year. So you can see the sun's here. We're going around the sun, and from our perspective, excuse me, the sun traces this path around the celestial sphere. That's the ecliptic. Now, you'll see here the Earth is tilted, as I was saying earlier. This is the north celestial pole here. And this is the north ecliptic pole. And we're actually tilted a little bit such that we point off like 23.4 degrees from straight up. So if you were to imagine the equator around the Earth just extended out and projected onto the celestial sphere, well, that would give you the celestial equator. And of course, the Earth is going around the sun, and the sun is just flying through space. And as the Earth orbits the sun, it takes 1 year, of course. It takes 365 days, give or take, to go around the sun. And that's why we have leap years, because it takes a little bit, not quite 365 days. So every 4 years, we've got to correct for it with an extra day, right? But when the Earth crosses the ecliptic, which happens twice a year, that's when we have our equinoxes. And those happen in the spring and the fall. And they're called equinoxes because these are the points at which the days and the nights are the same length, the exact same length. And then so say we have the vernal equinox and we go down here, perhaps it is summer in the northern hemisphere and winter in the southern hemisphere. That's where you're going to have your longest day of the year in North America, which is the first day of summer, and your shortest day of the year in the southern hemisphere, which is winter. And when we're on the other side of the sun, it's going to be opposite. You see, because of this axis tilt of the Earth, when the northern hemisphere is experiencing summer, the southern hemisphere is in winter, and vice versa. So right now, even though it's May in Australia, they are heading into their fall, because that's just how it works, right? Because of the fact that the Earth is a globe and whatnot. Tell this to your flat Earth friends if you have any, right? So that's the celestial sphere. Okay, so what does all this have to do with astrology? Well, you've no doubt heard of the constellations of the zodiac. Here they are. See, we've got Virgo, Leo, Libra, Scorpio. These are the constellations of the zodiac in Western astrology. So what is the zodiac? The zodiac is all of the constellations that appear in the ecliptic. So if we go back here, the ecliptic right here is the path the sun's motion from as seen from Earth traces across the sky throughout the year. Well, the zodiac are all the constellations. It's all the constellations along that path. That's what the zodiac is. Well, you might be a Leo or you might not be. And we'll get to that. It has to do with, shall we say, something like a calibration error. But we'll get to that. So constellations, what are constellations anyway, right? Constellations are groups of stars, but they're grouped together as seen from Earth. So if we look up into the sky and we see the Big Dipper, you know, the stars don't actually look like that out in space, right? They look like that as seen from Earth. If we saw the Big Dipper from a different perspective, it would look completely different because those stars are all different sizes and they're all different distances away from the planet Earth. Likewise with the constellations of the zodiac. But because of that, we can think of the constellations of the zodiac and the constellations in the rest of the celestial sphere as like provinces on a map, right? The celestial sphere, even though space is three-dimensional, the celestial sphere is a two-dimensional map of how it looks from Earth. So constellations on the celestial sphere are like countries on a map. They delineate areas of the sky. And the same goes for astrology. When we say that, like right now, I don't know where Mars is, but if I say like, oh, Mars is rising in Leo or whatever, that means that that night, that's the area of the sky where Mars is going to appear. And an astrologer will say that that means something significant for you. We can define divine information about you based on that. But an astronomer will just use it for knowing where stuff is, knowing where to point his or her telescope, for example. Now, the names of these will no doubt be familiar to you. For example, if you're a Leo, that's because you were born, this is a little hard to read, but between July 23rd and August 22nd, I believe. So I think we had some Leos. We had a Leo, the Leo gang. All the Leos are here. Well, astrologers use information like this to make horoscopes, and horoscopes are basically star charts of the night sky as it was on the day that you were born. Yeah, we've got a bunch of Leos. Well, we've got two. We've got at least two. Or do we? We'll see. So, you know, if I'm a Leo, that's because I was born during a certain time of year when the sun was rising in the constellation. So that's, you know, we talk about sun signs and moon signs in astrology. For those who are in the know, everyone's abbreviating their like Leo is short, but I'm a Sag. I'm a Cap. I guess that makes me a Virg. I'm a Virg. I was born during yeah. So basically, if you were a Scorpio, you could say I'm a Scorp. I'm a Scorp dog. So yeah, these are like maps. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's right. That's okay. Yeah, thanks, Taylor. That's what I was trying to remember. Yeah, you have there are different signs, and usually when we talk about this stuff, we're talking about a sun sign, which is the constellation the sun rose in the day you were born. So when I was born, the sun should have risen in the constellation Virgo way back in 86 when I was born. All those years ago. Yes. But does it? Does it? Ask yourself, does it? This is what I mean. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but these are all actually off by one sign. And I'll tell you why. When we came up with this, it was like 2,000 years ago, even longer, with this map and where the constellations are. And remember, there's an axis tilt here. So if the celestial pole is straight up and down, the Earth is tilted like so. And as a result, over a period of, I think like every 12,000 years or something, it wobbles like this, right? Like a top, like a spinning top that's wobbling. So here, yes, yes, yes. The calibration error is this. The Earth has been wobbling since the Babylonians or whoever came up with this astrological system that we're still using today. But astrologers haven't updated the system to account for this wobble. And as a result, each of these signs is off. So if you're a Libra, you're not actually a Libra. You're actually a Scorpio. Similarly, I'm a Virgo, or so the astrologers tell me. But if I go out and look at the star charts for when I was actually born, I would find that the sun is not rising in Virgo, it's rising in Libra. So am I a Virgo or a Libra, right? Calibration error. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Leos or Virgos. Everybody is bumped over one whole sign. Okay, Sydney, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just have a question. Does that mean, because you know how there's like the character traits associated with each of the signs, does that mean you then have like theoretically you have the characteristics of the sign over, or the sign over actually has the characteristics of the sign before?
Good question, right? And the thing is, the astrologers won't tell us. Like I want to know, like, what does this mean? Yeah, they decided, yeah, Conrad, you're right. They're like, we're not gonna worry about this. Taylor, yeah. Well, because if we knew how this all worked, we would know why it doesn't work, right? I mean, the astrology can be fun, but astrology, you know, like if you're really seriously depending on it for important information, you know, about making big life-changing decisions, and you're paying lots of money at the same time, I mean, that's a little bit that I don't know if you want to be doing that, right? James, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
So like, I don't know about the whole star situation, but I've kind of been thinking that maybe there could be some merit to like people being born in January means their first memory is going to be in like December, you know? So maybe like the time of your first memory could have an effect that seems like a horoscope or an astrology sign.
Maybe. But you know, our first memories tend to be around the age of from around the age of 4.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and even then there's a lot of variation. Some people have memories from earlier than that, but it's rare. So it's hard. Like I have weird random memories. You know, that that are kind of like it's weird. I don't know when they're from, but I know they must have been old before 4. But when in the year were they from? Oh, I have no idea, right? But perhaps. Oh, that's weird. Oh, weird. Yeah. So if these are true, then oh yeah, that's funny actually. Conrad's first memory was his 4th birthday. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like weird random memories like this. Yeah, like stuff like that. Like I have those too. They're rare and they're not very reliable, but they can happen. But we don't tend to start hanging on to proper long-term memories until we're 4. So does astrology work? That is the question. Well, first of all, like, yeah, I'm not going into huge detail here, but like Taylor said in the chat, you have your sun sign like this. You have your moon sign, which, because the sun signs are off, the moon signs are going to be off, and earth signs, which also off, because things move. Things move. The stars change. You know, we used to think that the heavens were permanent, that the celestial sphere really was a big sphere that was out there with all the stars in it. We called it the firmament. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about when astrology seems to work. Why does it seem to work? So for example, let's say, what was I going to say? Oh, right, permanence. Yeah, you know, we used to think that nothing changed up there. That's why comets were such a big deal to ancient peoples, and even to early modern people. A comet could be a sign of doom, right? And doom, I don't mean doom like doom. I don't mean you're dead. I mean doom. Doom means fate, right? Really, if you go back, in far enough in the English language, doom doesn't necessarily have a negative connotation. It just means your fate. Well, no, I mean, what I'm saying is that when it comes to the sky, things were so regular that we thought we could predict things using the sky. That's what astrology is all about. But the sky does change. That's what comets and shooting stars show us. Shooting stars are brief, but comets hang in the sky for months on end. And then they go away. And this was like a sign of doom for ancient people, because the sky's not supposed to change. Same thing with eclipses. If there's a solar or lunar eclipse, people are like, whoa, what? That's not usually what happens. What's going on? Sign of doom. I had a boss, I'm not even kidding, who, when I told her there was going to be a solar eclipse, it was the one that, remember we had one a few years ago, and Donald Trump was staring at it. Do you guys remember seeing that on the news? Seeing the president of the most powerful nation on the planet looking at the sun? Yeah, he pointed to it like, yes, there's the sun. Like, so first of all, never do that, please. You will damage your eyesight. Yeah. But, you know, so this eclipse was going on, and I was saying to my boss at work, oh, I really wish I lived in a place where I could see the eclipse, because it wasn't visible from here, not fully. It was there was it was a partial eclipse from here. But I remember I took a colander. There's a trick you can do where you take a colander and you just hold it and let the shadows the light go through, and it will actually cast a shadow in dozens of little shadows in the shape of the eclipse. So I did do that, but I didn't see it directly. Anyway, my boss says to me, you know, that's a sign of doom. Not in those words, but she says, you know, that's a sign that things are gonna happen, you know, because it's a sign. And I said to her, like, but hang on. We can predict eclipses. How are they signs if we can predict them, right? And it's called the Saros cycle. We can predict eclipses. We know we're not surprised by solar eclipses anymore, right? Well, we can make guesses about earthquakes. I don't think we're very good at predicting earthquakes, but I mean, with an eclipse, we can predict, like, I could be like, okay, so for the next century, here's all of the eclipses, when they'll happen, down to the second, and where they'll be visible from. We can do that now. Thales, a pre-Socratic philosopher from ancient Greece, knew how to predict eclipses too. Yeah, like, so the example of Columbus is a bit like Thales, who could predict eclipses. But people then accused him of being a witch, because he was like, they thought he was causing the eclipses, perhaps, right? But yeah, Columbus was kind of how we say in philosophy, I believe the technical term is a horrible person. So yeah. But yeah, if you can predict an eclipse, you can make people that don't know how eclipses work perhaps think that you have abilities. So, by the way, if you want to see an explanation of the thing I told you about, the zodiac calibration error, Bill Nye the Science Guy will explain it to you if you follow this link. So one reason why we should be suspect claims of the claims of astrologers is because of that calibration error. Another is what is something Sagan mentions. There are lots of cases where there are twins, where one dies young and another lives to a ripe old age. And if astrology is true, then how does that happen? Because they're both born at pretty much the same time, maybe within minutes or hours of one another. But the planets and stars shouldn't have moved so much that they'd have profoundly different futures ahead of them. And also, not only is the zodiac off because of the wobble in the Earth's axis, but stars themselves also change. They just change very, very slowly. If you were to take a time machine to the future, say 10 or 12,000 years into the future, the night sky would look a bit different. If you went 100,000 years into the future, the night sky would be unrecognizable, because stars also move, right? They're not fixed like we used to think. Stars also die, right? Stars can stars can go out of existence in a number of different ways. Sometimes a supernova explosion. Another thing that people thought was a sign of doom when they saw a supernova. Supernova explosions are when stars of a sufficient mass collapse in on themselves, because the nuclear reactions at their cores can no longer keep gravity from pulling everything in, and it pulls in and squishes itself together and then explodes violently. And these are some of the brightest, most energetic things that we've ever observed. A supernova will outshine its galaxy. It'll be brighter than all of the stars in its galaxy. So you could have a supernova explosion. If there were a supernova in the Milky Way galaxy, our galaxy, depending on where it was, if it were close enough, we could see it during the daytime, like we can see the moon when it's out during the daytime. That is how bright supernovas are. And again, the sky's not supposed to change, but hey, stars can die. They can die violently in a supernova explosion. Maybe I don't think you'd need sunscreen, but I mean, maybe if it was really close, I don't know. Wouldn't want to get a gamma ray burst, would we? Now, so the sky's not supposed to change, but it changes. So how does all of this affect us, right? How do the stars and planets and stuff Oh well, if it was our sun, we would just be dead. Yeah, but our sun is not large enough to go supernova. It doesn't have enough mass. No, don't worry about that. Instead, what will happen is it will grow and become a red giant, probably subsuming Mercury, Venus, Earth, and maybe Mars. So we'll just all be a cloud of vapor in like 4 billion years, vaporized by the red giant sun. And then it will shrink down and become, I believe it's a white dwarf. It'll sort of shed its layers. It won't do it violently like a supernova. It just doesn't have the mass. Yeah, this is like 4 or 5 billion years away, so don't sweat it. Okay, don't worry about it. We don't have to worry about this happening. So yeah, why don't we take a quick break, come back in 10 minutes or so, and then we'll just have a little discussion about how astrology works or doesn't work, and whether 'tis better to be interested in science than pseudoscience. Okay, so let's come back in, say, 10-15 minutes. Okay. Muted. Okay, now I'm not muted anymore, and I'm resuming the recording. So hi, welcome back, everyone. Share the screen. My screen share is loading. Okay, here we go. I just wanted to say, Taylor, I thought that poster is pretty sick.
Thank you. I turned my camera off because I'm eating, but
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of X-Files. So.
yeah, that's great. I think that's a really nice touch. So yeah, I tell you all about the smoking man at that conference that I did? I can't remember if I told you that. So I was at this, it was the Center for Inquiry Canada, doing a conference, and I'm sorry if I told you. I also did the high school version of this class, and I'm getting things mixed up. But the guy who played the cigarette smoking man on the X-Files was the keynote speaker at this skeptical conference that I was at. So that was really interesting. And he did this. His speech was about, or not his speech, but his talk was about. He did this sort of fusing of Cartesian philosophy with acting technique, which I thought was really cool, just as a philosopher, but not as an actor. And he, and I went right before he did, so I was like, it was kind of nerve wracking, but pretty cool, pretty cool. He's actually currently on a show. What's that show? It's where he's a robot, he's dead. Upload? Afterlife? It's on Amazon. I can't think of it, but it's a show where you die, and if you're rich, you can go to like they can upload your brain into like a really swanky afterlife. But if you're poor, you go to like the crappy like homeless shelter afterlife kind of thing. It's not Black Mirror. It's on Amazon. It is called it's called Upload. The Good Place is another good one, by the way. Yes, and so is Black Mirror for that matter. But The Good Place is fantastic. But this show is where it's not like a philosophical. Well, it is philosophical, but it's not quite like The Good Place. It's more like a dystopian sort of sci-fi thing. And yeah, there's that one. There's a few episodes of Black Mirror. I actually did not mind the ending of The Good Place. I don't mind that ending. I think that's kind of what they had to do with it. I think that even in death, there must be some finality. But those are all related to some pretty complicated questions about meaning in life, right? And there's only so much you can do with that in a television show. But I certainly did enjoy the whole show. Yeah, no, fair enough. Endings of shows are tricky, but yeah, the Black Mirror episode, there's a couple that I can think of. Obviously, there's the happy one, right? San Junipero. That one's happy. Like that one's too happy for Black Mirror, where they end up together. Yes, he's okay. I'm glad I'm not alone. Yeah, it didn't make me cry or anything, but I did really like it. I thought it was fine. It wasn't like Lost, or it wasn't like a Lost situation or something like that. So anyway, oh god, goodness, where was I going? The White Christmas episode. Yes, that one. Yeah. Yeah. The White Christmas was the Christmas special where they're torturing somebody, or it's been a while, but San Junipero is the one where there's that couple and they end up in the digital afterlife together, and they were all old, but now they're young. So that's pretty happy. But then there's that other one where this woman's husband dies. I think it was Domhnall Gleeson who played that character, and he dies in a car crash. And then so his wife gets this thing where they send you like a blank body, and she activates it such that it turns into her husband, but it's like this weird flesh puppet of her husband, and she just ends up keeping it in the basement or something. Like, oh man. The first episode that I saw was the one where the prime minister. Oh my God, this is getting so far off the rails. The first episode I saw was where the prime minister had to make love to the pig. Yeah. Yeah. Which I thought, that's an awfully interesting place to start, but but it really does get you. It hooks you, doesn't it? Yeah. I don't know if I remember White Bear. I remember I remember Striking Vipers because that was really interesting, and I was like, I'm gonna show Yeah, the new season is coming. Striking Vipers is the one where there's two buddies who are just bros in real life, and then they play the virtual reality video game, and in the video game, they're not men in the video game. One's a man and one's a woman, and they end up like having an affair. and so I'm not laughing at the episode, by the way. I mean, I enjoyed that episode. I thought it was very interesting. But there was one time I was like, I've got to show my father Black Mirror because he loves sci-fi, but he's kind of old and not, he doesn't really know what to do with stuff like that. And of course Netflix randomly puts that episode on, and I'm like, oh, this will be interesting. So I don't know if he was paying attention, but yeah, the two bros getting married, I thought that was pretty interesting. So some of the scenarios they deal with on that show are pretty thought-provoking, though. Really. I mean, go ahead, like, two bros. The weirdest part for me was how I guess how he kept it secret. But like the happiest part of that for me was like at the end everybody was cool with it. Like he can go bro down in VR, and his wife can go on a date, and it's this whole happy situation where we end up in a nice place. So yeah, I thought that was fine. Bandersnatch, yeah. I guess, it really was about like a big theme in that episode, not Bandersnatch, but the other one was the two characters sort of like dealing with their own internalized sort of homophobia, I think. And also raises questions about love, which you could probably talk about if there's a philosophy class on. Oh, you mean the guy? Oh, yeah. Yeah, at the end, I was kind of like, okay, but why is this a once a year arrangement you've made? I mean, why? That was weird to me. Why is it just once a year? It should be whenever. Yeah. I don't think that people really know. I think that on television shows, it's probably, I think a lot of television shows are still figuring out how to write like polyamory. You know what I mean? And I think that's a case of that. Or maybe if they don't know how to write it, they're trying to present it to an audience that may not know a lot about those forms of relationships, right? I think that might be why that seemed weird, because that was the weirdest part for me. Was like, yeah, but why once a year? Like, I don't know. If everybody's cool with it, why aren't they cool with it all the time? I don't know. That confused me, but what do I know? Let's talk about whether astrology works. And let's open it up for discussion. So we've covered this slide already, but what if we just let's expand the old screen here, or maybe I can't. We can leave it like this. So, what do we think of astrology? And first of all, I want to say, like, I know that there are people that in this class who believe in it in say the weak sense, where maybe it's fun and maybe they get a little insight into themselves. And there's people that may believe in it in a strong sense, where they might pay money for such a service. I've had students from different backgrounds other than myself, who've told me like, oh yeah, back home, before you do anything important, you got to talk to the astrologer, right? So, in the West, astrology is this kind of like fun thing that some people are kind of, maybe it's real, maybe it's not, but we don't take it super seriously. But in some places, it's taken very seriously. So, Obviously, not trying to step on anyone's toes or anything, but what do we think? Like, do we think that astrology works the way astrologers say it does? Does it work in a sort of different sense? Or does it not work at all? What do we think? Let's get some discussion going. Taylor, go ahead.
Hey, I think that it can work, like I said earlier in the chat, in sort of like a placebo way, where you can find like aspects of your life. And it's kind of like that cold reading where like some of the things that they say are just so broad that like it kind of would apply to like a large group of people.
Yes.
I recently like learned about the rising and the moon sign, and like how the moon is supposed to like represent your emotions, your rising is supposed to represent your personality, and then your sun sign is supposed to be like how others view you. And I think it can be interesting because I like personality quizzes in general. Like just any sort of personality quiz is really interesting to me. Like Hogwarts sorting houses, like all that kind of crap is like, like it's fun, but I can see what you're saying, where it's kind of can be like a money grab, the way that mediumship can be a money grab. And if there's no science behind it, then it's kind of
yeah. And I used to be, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned personality tests, because I'll just skip ahead a little bit to this slide. There is something called the Barnum effect, where, and I think I've talked about this before, where the Barnum effect is where people think that general statements refer specifically to themselves. And remember, it's named after P.T. Barnum, right? The Barnum and Bailey circus guy. Those statements are also a problem on personality tests, just as they are in horoscopes. So, for example, you might read in a horoscope that you will face a challenge this week. Okay, that's very general, but it's easy for you to kind of lock in on, oh, that's right, I have the dentist appointment. That's my challenge. Obviously, astrology is true, right? That's called the Barnum effect. And that is also at play in personality psychology in a big way. So I think it's cool that you mentioned that, Taylor. Sydney, why don't you go ahead, and then I'll see what people are saying in the chat.
Yeah, I find personally with astrology and manifestation and any of those things like that, I believed them more and sought them out more when I was like at a more unsure place in my life, more insecure, didn't really know who I was trying to figure out my place in the world. I was like not on the cusp of like 19 turning 20. And I like actively sought out a bunch of those things. And now that I'm a little bit older and more self-confident and all of that, I don't feel as connected to that stuff anymore. And I almost do have like a bit of a, not like a rejection of it, because I still think it's fun, but in some ways I do see how like it takes advantage of people who are like lost and looking for answers. And I think there's something also very strong about, like, I know astrology has existed for generations and generations, but I think there's something very specific about the Gen Z millennial generation where things are changing. There's a lot of media, there's a lot of capitalism, and we're actively trying to like find our identity in things and have things explain who we are for us. And we're like trying to put ourselves in boxes. I've noticed that on TikTok, there's like all these identity labels. And then there's, as going back to those personality quizzes, there's like the INFP and all of those.
Yeah, the Myers-Briggs. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's another one. There's like, are you a one wing two? I don't know what that one is, but that's like a really popular one as well that I've heard people talk about a lot and refer to, especially people in my age group. So yeah, like I just have like a slight issue with that, just because I think to a degree it can put people in boxes, and it takes advantage of those who are like a little bit lost.
Yes, I think that's kind of where things get tricky with this, right? I think that if you want to enjoy a little astrology or anything paranormal related, more power to you. I don't believe that it works, but whatever, you do you. The problem for me is when the stuff starts to become exploitative, right? I'd like you say, like, people in your demographic, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, first of all, it's not easy being young. It's not easy figuring out who you are. Everybody goes through that journey, and it's different for everybody, right? Some have it easy and some don't. Some have it quite difficult. But when you are having it difficult, and someone or something comes along saying that they have the answers, like you were saying, it can feel like a relief to get an answer that tells you something about yourself, even if it's not necessarily the right answer, right? So yeah, it's tough. It's tough growing up. I mean, and then once you've grown up, it's tough just existing, right? But yeah, like Conrad says, there's also this perhaps like a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy element to this, right? And yeah, Nicholas, this is also an interesting suggestion as well, where yeah, but I don't know if I don't know if birth rates go like that. But I guess when we had less stability, people did have fewer children, depending. Yeah, I think it really depends on the time and the place we're talking about. But yeah, something like what Conrad said, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy, perhaps, where, yeah, maybe like you say, your horoscope says you need to be strong, so you do that and become strong, but that's not because the horoscope told you anything about yourself. You did that, right? That's why it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Oh, I see, like very far back, like if times were not stable, maybe we'd try and aim to have children when there was more food, or yeah, I'm not sure. We'd have to ask an anthropologist, really, I think. But Tabitha, let's say, what's she saying here? Somebody purposely poses statements in that way. Well, usually I wouldn't say. I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, that's a Barnum statement too, I guess. But also kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you assume that you did something wrong, like if your teacher says, okay, you know who you are, and she's not talking about you, but then you just blurt out, I'm the one who didn't return the stapler, even though that's not what she's mad about, then that's also kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy element, right? Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, is anyone being exploited? Is anyone being harmed? Is anyone being taken advantage of? If that's not happening, fine, carry on. I don't think anybody should care. But something, on the flip side, something Sagan says in the film is that, we have daily astrology columns in major newspapers, and nowadays we have apps and websites and so forth, but we don't have is the equivalent for science, at least not in newspapers, which is unfortunate. I think that's unfortunate because, and this is what I think Sagan really tries to drive home, is that the way that things actually work as we understand them is far more fascinating and beautiful than how astrology says it works. And it's a shame when people do not get the chance to learn and appreciate that. And I absolutely agree with him. Because when I was a kid, I was the nerd with the telescope, right? And I even remember one, I think it was for my birthday when I was, I don't know, must have been 11, 12, 10, 11, 12. And Josh is really interested in stars and planets and stuff. So what do I get? I get a book on astrology, for goodness sake, not a book on astronomy. So yeah, I get it. That, I don't know, Taylor, why they do still have those. I think it's just something to fill up space, perhaps. I honestly don't know. I mean, there must be people interested in reading them. But if you really believe in astrology, what you have to do is actually go and get a horoscope for you. It's got to be custom made, and that costs a lot of money. So yeah, I really don't know. Yeah, I agree. Like, it's crazy that at least when it comes to really reputable newspapers, like, they're supposed to hold themselves to very high standards of journalistic integrity when reporting on a story, right? And then, so what the heck is a horoscope doing in there? I don't know. It's weird, right? But but beyond the Barnum effect, there may also be confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we tend to remember information which supports our worldview, our pre-existing beliefs about how the world works. And we tend to forget or ignore information that doesn't support that. So maybe at one time you read a horoscope and, it's got Barnum statements and you felt one of those really applied to you. That's going to be very memorable. Whereas all of the times when the horoscopes didn't say anything meaningful about you, you forget about those, right? So that's also possibly at play here. Sydney, go ahead.
Yeah, it also reminds me of, on Urban Dictionary, there was this thing, I don't know if they still do this, but if you search up your name on Urban Dictionary, it'll give you like a definition of your name and the kind of person you are. And I remember reading that in the 9th grade and being like, oh my gosh, that is so totally me. But there are so many people named Sydney. Who's writing this? And like, I remember feeling like pretty validated, being like, oh my God, that's literally me. But I just feel like it's very similar to those newspaper magazine horoscopes.
Yeah, it's you're right. For the same reason, for Barnum statements. Is it just the first name, or it's just your first name you have to put?
No,
right?
It's literally just your first name. And they'll be like, Sydney is such a cool girl, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, I'm gonna Google. I'm gonna Urban Dictionary my name. Okay, that's weird. I just got the ultimate Barnum statement. It says, Josh is me. Weird. No. Josh, a group or a pile of weed. Hey, dude, have you seen any Josh around here? That's amazing. Oh, Josh, a real asshole. Okay. Oh, here we go. Josh is a sensitive, caring guy who will do anything to solve problems. So all of these, in a way, do, I guess, say something that resonates with me, but I don't know. I hope I'm not an asshole. But yeah, my name is definitely me. I certainly am Josh. That is true.
It used to be like a crazy long paragraph. Like, it was at least 250 words.
Yeah, that's
2015.
Yeah, the one where it starts with Josh is a sensitive soul is down. It's down at the bottom, but it's about a paragraph. I just didn't want to read the whole thing. But yeah, they're all Barnum statements. And of course, Barnum statements, confirmation bias, all these cognitive biases that we have are at play here. Also, we should remember, as we've seen from reading Blackmore, people who believe in one paranormal thing will tend to believe in another. So if you already believe in paranormal phenomenon X, you might be likely to believe in Taylor's is crazy too, apparently. Yeah, it might be weird. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. I shouldn't have switched screens. Right. If you believe in certain paranormal phenomena, that's going to predict belief in other paranormal phenomena, such as astrology. Yeah. Of course, this is not necessarily the case, but yeah. And also, here's, as we saw last time, people who believe paranormal events have happened to them are actually not as good at making probability judgments as those who tend to have lower levels of belief. Remember, this goes back to the example of the guy who was having a dream that his friend died, and then he woke up and got the call his friend had died in a car crash. What are the odds, right? Well, the odds are actually not that crazy that happens to people. It's just that we're really bad at making, all of us. I mean, some of us are better, some are worse, but in general, humans are just pretty bad at making probability judgments. That's why we do probability theory, right? So I hope that this allows you to appreciate astrology and Sagan's discussion of why it's not a science, right? And if you've watched the documentary, you know what's up. If you haven't seen it yet, basically he gives a brief account of astrology, how it works. He doesn't go into the same level of detail that we've done here. But I think he does a pretty good job of driving the point home, why paying attention to the night sky was so important for our distant ancestors. And this is for people all around the world. And I think our level of technological achievement notwithstanding, we still have a Paleolithic era brain, as I've said in previous eras, right? Our Stone Age brain. And even if you live in a society with science and technology and stuff, there's something about astrology that can pull you in, because it just seems to work, right? Because of our Stone Age brain and how our Stone Age brains work. That's the stuff astrology plays on. Our animism, our cognitive bias, things like this. But I think it's really, that's really something to be said about the beauty of a scientific explanation. Before I say more about that, Sydney, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry. I just think as well, as I mentioned earlier, like Gen Z millennial, I think as our generation also tends to move further away from like traditional religion practices like Christianity and all of that, I think a lot of people are still looking for some sort of spirituality.
Yes.
And I think they find like comfort in astrology, all of those things, tarot, manifesting, crystals, because it's not like an exclusionary practice, it's not homophobic, it's none of those things as far as I know. So I think that is maybe part of the reason why our generation also tends to lean into it as well.
I think so. I mean, it's really all about finding meaning in life. We all want to live a meaningful life, right? And it's true. I mean, when Nietzsche said God is dead and we have killed him, what he meant was that science has kind of made it impossible to believe in religion the way that religion teaches you to. So what do? how do you find meaning in life? I think a lot of people, as you say, are turning toward non-religious yet spiritual sources of meaning. Some of them, I mean, I get what you're saying as well. Not all of them are. I mean, certainly a lot of them don't have the problems associated with certain religions. For instance, homophobia, but some do. Some do. There are some pretty culty new age organizations after all. But yes, you're right. Meaning, the quest for meaning is what's at the core of a lot of this. Taylor, go ahead, please.
Yeah, in your opinion, do you think that like yoga and meditation is in this same like sphere, if you will, just because of like how beneficial, like even my doctor says that like meditating is good for you and healthy, and like it
Yeah.
has like holistic healing or whatever. But I wondered like because a lot of people that I know who are into yoga and meditation are also into astrology. Wondered if like you felt that there was a difference between the two, or if that they're all kind of like frou-frou. I don't know.
Well, in and of itself, I don't think that yoga or meditation is especially flim-flammy, right? But you're certainly right that it is sort of adjacent. It is new age adjacent, we could say. And like, it doesn't have to, like, my partner does a lot of yoga, and it's just for physical and mental health. Like, she'll do a thing, do specific routines for specific things. Like Conrad says, stretching is healthy, but it doesn't give you superpowers. So if you've got some lower back tension, there's probably a yoga routine for that. But are you going to align your chakras? Probably not, right? But again, we have to be careful because yoga's a really interesting example, because yoga also really highlights the problems with appropriation too. Because there's yoga, like actual yoga, and then there's like yoga the way it's practiced outside of India. So yoga, like religious yoga, there are a number of different schools, and it's still about the health of the mind and the body. It can be, but not necessarily. So the idea that you have chakras and karma and all of that stuff, that's all part of a religion, of religious practice, and mystics would do yoga to work on some aspect of the mind or the body, right? But then when it comes to Western yoga, there are all kinds of problems. First of all, how yoga was originally developed as we know it today was during the British Raj, when the British Empire ruled India, and you would have white settlers putting on yoga classes for the locals, which is just like cultural appropriation 101, right? We're going to take your stuff and sell it back to you. I mean, it's just slimy. The most recent wave of yoga, which started in the 70s, was popularized by teachers from India. Yes, Bikram. Yeah, that's exactly right. So then yoga was sort of reintroduced to the West by actual teachers, actual yogis from India, which is good. But then, yeah, as you say in the chat, some yogis develop a sort of cult-like following and use it to exploit people, which is, not really very good. So it's a whole thing. It's a mess. But if you're talking about using yoga to do stretches, to do like like body weight, like static body weight stuff, like yoga's great for that. Do yoga. Use it as a, think of it like a tool, right? Use it for what it's good for. Don't use it for what it's not good for. Use a screwdriver to screw in a screw. Don't use a hammer, right? And don't try a nail in a nail with a screwdriver. Yoga is like that. Then again, yeah, good for core strength. Yeah, like I remember I took a series of kickboxing classes when I was an undergraduate, and we'd always start and end with a little bit of yoga, because it was really good for stretching, for warm up and cool down stretches. And then when we had our core class, I mean, it was all yoga and planks and stuff. So it's good. It's good. It's good. It has a use. But I mean, just as much as there's a lot of overlap between yoga and new age stuff, there's overlap between yoga and junk health, like health junk science stuff too. Right? What? That's so weird. But couldn't you just meditate? Like, couldn't you just do yoga for Jesus? I don't know. Like, I'm not Christian. But yeah, like you could make it more Christian rather than just banning. Oh, okay. So that's what you did. Like, but it's for Jesus though. Okay, all right, that's fine. Yes. Yeah, see, I don't understand. Oh, Gwyneth Paltrow, she needs to stop. Yeah, she's I honestly think she needs help. Like, she's so far down that rabbit hole. Like, my partner, again, she's telling me like how she like does the intermittent fasting. Gwyneth Paltrow, not my partner, does the intermittent fasting, but then also takes extra vitamins, like with an IV drip. And it's like, okay, that's malnutrition. Like, you have an eating disorder. Like, you need help. Like, that's not healthy. And so there's overlap, certainly, between the new age stuff and the junk science. Absolutely. They're really two sides of the same coin, right? So on the one hand, you have your spiritual gurus, and on the other, you have your Gwyneth Paltrows and your Joe Rogans, essentially. Like, Gwyneth Paltrow is kind of like Joe Rogan for yoga, if you think about it. Yeah. And she has that egg. Like that egg, the egg. I'm not going to talk about it, but like, it's just so silly. Like, what is it supposed to do? Oh. Yeah, I mean, just, if you don't know about this, do not Google it. Don't worry about it. Live your life. Just keep living your life. You don't need to know this. Anyway, yeah. So one thing that I really like that Sagan does here is talk about Johannes Kepler, who shows that there are law-like relations amongst celestial bodies, but in a way that allows us to understand how things actually are. Right? Yeah, what if you do the wrong pose? I don't know. I'm not Christian, but Jesus is supposed to be a very forgiving figure, isn't he? It's like, it's all good. It's all good as long as you love Jesus and you accept him as your personal savior. It's like you can get away with murder, it seems. That's hyperbole, obviously not, but I don't know. I don't understand. Like I said last time, I am not religious. I don't know what that's like. Oh yeah, I do think that. Yeah, he would totally have done yoga. I think he might have meditated, right? And yeah, exactly. So emphasizing how the beauty of how things actually work rather than just debunking is why I wanted you to watch this. Sagan actually doesn't spend a lot of time debunking astrology. I've spent more time on that here today. What Sagan actually does is tell you a story. And Sagan, I maintain, is the greatest popularizer of science, the greatest scientific storyteller there's ever been. I know we still have some good ones. Bill Nye, obviously. Neil deGrasse Tyson is out there popularizing the science. Brian Greene is a big one. A lot of good ones. In my own opinion, I don't think any of them come close to explaining things as effectively as Sagan did. And it's a real shame that we don't have him around anymore, because we could use a Carl Sagan right now. Yeah, Hank Green is excellent. Hank Green is pretty good. And John Green's pretty good too, his brother. He's good at the history stuff. But yeah, so I think there's really something interesting in this story where Kepler, who was an astrologer, who wanted to believe in the perfect, the perfection of the celestial sphere and the perfect solids, he had to give that up. Which is hard. It's hard when you have a deeply held belief that you have to re-examine and give up, especially if that belief means something to you. And again, maybe I'm not the best person to talk about this, because I've never had to deal with, for example, a loss of faith. But I imagine that for Kepler, abandoning his astrological theories and developing his astronomical theories of the motions of the planets would have been like a crisis of faith sort of moment. Again, I don't know what that's like. Yeah, I don't know what it's like. I wish I did. I guess I can kind of imagine, like, what if science turned out to be wrong? But then it's like, yeah, but that happens all the time. We just discover something new and learn that the other thing was wrong, and you just have to get used to it. Like I'm not mad about Pluto not being a planet, like elementary school, 9 planets, Pluto, 9th planet, Pluto. Then, okay, it's not a planet anymore. Okay. It wasn't like I believed in God at one point and then my faith was shaken. It wasn't like that. So I really don't know. Yeah. I guess I know because of stories like this one that Sagan is telling us about, Kepler and Tycho Brahe working all of this out. I mean, Copernicus set the stage for these two, and these two set the stage for Galileo and Isaac Newton. So these are all big figures in the scientific revolution. When Newton said, "I see far because I stand on the shoulders of giants," he was talking about Kepler, Brahe, Galileo, Copernicus. That's who he was talking about, right? So, Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question. The second reading response, I wondered if I could, there's a wiki page that has every single scientific thing that's ever been debunked, from way back, and things that are recent too. I wondered if I could focus on that as a reading response, or if that's too big of a project and I should
I think you could do it. I think what you would want to do is probably not try to focus on all of it, but maybe select a few examples to show that, okay, so science, many scientific claims have been wrong, But you know, you'd want to like, what's the similarity and what's the difference here between science and pseudoscience, right? Is what I would try to emphasize. So yeah, science gets stuff wrong, but then it corrects itself. Whereas pseudoscience, they tend not to do that, right?
Yeah, it'll say at the end of like them, when you click on their page, it'll say like what replaced it, right? So like astronomy is there, and like, sorry, astrology is there, and then it was replaced by astronomy, and it'll say like the year and how it came about.
Yeah.
So like maybe if I could find a group of them that are interesting, that I could group together and like find a common ground, like that would be cool. Because I know Wiki's not really like an academic source, but it's sort of just like a gathering place where they all are.
Yeah, and by the way, when it comes to citing that stuff, I mean, if possible, go down into the references section, find the good references, because not all of the sources on a Wikipedia article are good ones, but find the good ones, and that's what you use as your sources rather than the Wikipedia article. That's how I recommend doing that. So yeah, it is possible to use Wikipedia. But yeah, like Johnny in the chat says, yeah, just go down, find those original sources, make sure they're the good ones, because there are some bad ones. And those are okay to use. That's how you use Wikipedia. But yeah, I think that would be good. My suggestion might be like something to do with another science or perhaps medicine. So you could do with like what Sagan does with astrology, you could do with alchemy or something. Right. And this is another point of departure between science and pseudoscience. Like I said, like skeptics of science will often point out how wrong science has been in the past. And that's true. But that's because science is like a self-correcting thing. When we figure out that we were wrong about something, it's because we've learned another correct thing. So it's like, yeah, we had something wrong, but everything we've learned that was wrong was at the expense of having learned something correct. The same is not the case with pseudoscience. Like the astrology example, it's not like astrologers don't know about axis tilt and the Earth's wobble. They just haven't fixed the system. They haven't fixed the error. Why not, right? If astrology works the way you say it does, you should probably fix that error, but they have not. So, but yeah, again, the point is not just to debunk. I think that when you just debunk, you end up in an echo chamber. And I've seen this. I've seen this myself, right? Like in the early 2000s, during the new atheism. Right, Richard Dawkins and what are the other ones? Sam Harris and Dan Dennett and Hitchens. They kind of sparked off this new atheism, right, on the internet and stuff, and yeah, I kind of cringe, but I was on YouTube back then, making videos about why God isn't real and whatnot, and it's real cringe looking back on it now. I mean, I'm still an atheist. I'm just like not like because the way those people operate and the way I operated was we were just kind of like, you know, talking to ourselves. There wasn't really any engagement with actual people with different opinions on this. I think that's probably just wrong. After all, Conan Doyle is a believer. He's not a very skeptical person. Remember the Coddington fairy hoax. He thought those were real fairies. So Conan Doyle is not a reliable he's not a reliable reporter when it comes to this. And besides, how would anybody know that the raps happened when the sisters weren't around? Who's around to hear these raps? Yeah, That's what I would say. It's, again, principle of parsimony or Occam's razor. What's the simplest explanation? What is the answer that gets us an answer with the fewest unwarranted assumptions, right? Or the fewest unanswered questions? Like I was saying, when you merely debunk, you end up just talking to people who already agree with you. Like, and that's what happened in my YouTube atheist days. Like, I'd be like, here's a reason why Jesus did not come back and resurrect or whatever after 3 days. And the atheists are all like, yeah, great video. And the Christians are all like, no, but you're wrong. And so it goes on and on forever. And eventually I got sick of that. I was like, this is dumb. I'd rather do some serious scholarship. And I ended up in university, actually. This is before I was an undergrad. So I was like, let's get off of YouTube. Let's not do internet philosophy. Let's go do some real philosophy. And that's what happened. So I think that if you take a different approach, if you don't just debunk, but if you actually show people that wonder, that awesomeness, the beauty in a real explanation, a natural explanation, that's more fascinating than any sort of flim-flam or woo-woo explanation that anyone could offer, to me anyway. So, I mean, ask yourself, just, in your spare time or on a critical response, if you are a believer in astrology, do you think that you're going to reevaluate that after this lecture, knowing more about how it all works? Oh, good question. Philosophy is fundamental. I wanted to do something fundamental, the biggest questions that I could ask, and that's philosophy. Science too. I mean, I'm both, right? I've trained as both. My master's and bachelor's are in philosophy. My PhD is in cognitive science. So I'm actually both. You can be both. So the next time the scientists are all like, rah, 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 philosophy, rah, 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 I mean, we're not enemies here, guys. Like, we just answer different kinds of questions. But I wanted to answer fundamental questions about everything. So it had to be philosophy. Sociology is good if you want to talk about how people work, but I don't know. I don't know. Philosophy is just more fundamental to me. And actually, one of my friends from undergraduate, who I'm still good buds with to this day. Matter of fact, I'm going to his wedding next month. He started in sociology, and then he also wanted to go deeper. So he ended up moving to philosophy and political science. So yeah, it really depends, I guess, what level of explanation and analysis you want. I wanted one that was quite deep and fundamental, so I went with philosophy. That's not to say that sociology isn't deep or that we can't learn anything. Sociology is quite important. So absolutely, if you like sociology, do that. It's just a different way of tackling different sorts of questions, I suppose. Ethics of mediums. I have not seen much of Altered Carbon. I'm aware of the premise, though, where people's minds can be placed in other bodies, right? It's actually on my list of stuff to watch. So I don't know how psychic mediums are treated in that show, but yeah, totally you could. Oh, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you could relate that to the ethics of mediums. Like, if mediums were real, would it be ethical to try and communicate with the dead? Maybe the dead are supposed to stay dead, right? Maybe if you're in the afterlife, you're not supposed to talk to the living. I don't know the rules, right? But yeah, you could absolutely do something with that for sure. I like seeing really imaginative stuff like that. Well, that's kind of like how I imagine Tartarus, right? The Greek underworld. I don't know if that's what it actually was supposed to be like, but I imagine a whole bunch of dead people who don't really know they're dead. And this is also the deal with ghosts, right? A lot of people are like, so if ghosts are the spirits of the deceased people and they're just hanging around, why are they doing that? Well, they've got unfinished business, or they don't know they're dead. There was this cool show on Netflix about that. What was it called? The haunting of something. Anyway, it's this old manor, the haunting of Bly Manor or something. Anyway, there's all these ghosts, there's all these people there, and they think they're alive, but they're not, they're dead. And they realize they're dead, and then they go away. You know, like that. Okay, that might be a similar one, right? I don't know this one. Or yeah, Sixth Sense. Yeah, spoiler alert. That's like the biggest twist in film, right? So I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, it's like that. Yeah, exactly. Like the the sheriff and a ghost shows up with the proper paperwork. That would be something. So anyway, just reflect for yourselves, like if you think, if you are a believer in astrology, does what you think about astrology change when you incorporate what you've learned about today into your system of knowledge? Did any of you know about any of this also, by the way? Those that do believe in astrology, did you know that this is how it was supposed to work? Yeah. Okay, so I don't think I saw Hill House, but I saw Bly Manor. Yeah. But yeah, same idea, right? The ghosts don't know they're dead. So if you believe in astrology, did you know how it was supposed to work? Or if you did not believe in astrology, is that because you knew how it was supposed to work, but also how it does not work? I guess is what I'm asking. How about animism? I mean, I think the idea that the stars and planets can affect us goes way back to our animistic tendencies, in the sense that maybe at one point we thought the planets were literally gods, or had powers to influence our lives, that they were agents somehow, agents of fate. Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate that. And if you believe in astrology, you might not think that that's what's at play, but it could be. In any case, what we're faced with is a sort of conflict between naturalistic explanations versus non-naturalistic explanations. But that is all I have for today. I'm just going to go back to my regular view. Well, I don't see any need to keep on going, really, but just quickly on the reading response that's due today, I have fixed the Dropbox, so it's due at midnight. I know that some of you have reached out to me for extensions. I just consider it done. I'm not going to have time to answer every email I've got about this, because I have to get ready and go to the dentist. But if you have emailed me and you need an extra day or two, that is fine. Remember, we're on the honor system here, right? So don't take advantage of this. Yeah, you choose an idea you're interested in, explain it for the reader. then critically assess it. So critique it or analyze it. State what's right, what's incorrect, why, what you agree with and disagree with, and why. Yeah, that is the point. It's basically if we emailed previously. Don't worry about emailing me, guys. Like, if you need an extra day, just take the extra day. Because I still have to meet with, like, our TA just got here. Like, we have a teaching assistant now, right? We have Jenna. So I still have to meet with, we still have to talk about evaluation and everything. It's fine. Just, if you need a day or two, that's fine. Email me and let me know. But it's not like you have to email me to get permission. I'm giving you permission. Like, if you need an extra day or two, that is okay. Try not to, like, don't everybody do this. If you can get it done for tonight, get it done. Right? But if you're really stuck, don't worry. It's not the end of the world. You should still be able to submit it in the Dropbox. Yes, you can use the same ideas. If you have an interesting idea in a reading response and you want to continue developing it in the final paper, yes, the essay outline is still due next week, but I will talk about that next time. I don't really have office hours, Sydney. They're by appointment, so we'd have to make an appointment, but yeah, I don't know if there's going to be time to do that over the next day or two, but you can also email me. You're probably, I mean, I've been getting a lot of messages about this where people seem to be like not sure what to do. And I've been answering endless emails asking for instructions, which I'm not talking to you guys. I know that the people who attend lectures should have a pretty good idea of what we're doing. But I'm getting questions like, what is a critical response? From people who haven't even watched any of the lectures yet. And that's just not really what I like to see. No, these assignments are pretty open-ended. Literally, take an idea that's interesting to you, explain it, critique it. That's it. It's not difficult. It's what we're doing in this class, right? Like, I just did it with astrology. I explained and critiqued astrology. Just do that. That's all you have to do. Yeah. And not only that, there's instructions in the course outline. I've given instructions in lecture. There are even a little bit of instructions in the template. So, you have what you need. You don't need me to tell you anything else. All you need to do is pick an idea, explain, critique in your own way. I don't want it to sound like some robot wrote this. I was thinking about this the other day. For years I was told to write as if I was not me, write with no little quirks and idiosyncrasies or anything like that, as if some machine had produced my essay and no one could tell my essay from someone else's. And now we've got ChatGPT. So now everybody's trained to write an essay like a freaking robot writes an essay, and there's no human touch. So people are like, how do we tell the difference between something that a human wrote and a computer wrote? We need that human touch, So be creative, use your own voice. Yes, you can use I, you can use we, you can use whatever pronoun you want. You can write it from the first person or third person perspective. Yes. GPT right now is really like a search engine. Do not copy and paste. I mean, I know that some people are going to cheat, and that's inevitable. And frankly, if you're okay with that, if you can sleep at night doing that, all right. Okay. I mean, what are you here for? You're paying a lot of money to be here, to try and develop your thinking skills, your knowledge base, to try and be better. So if you're okay with putting in all this time and money and just using a computer to cheat, whatever. Go ahead, Taylor.
Hey, yeah, so just question about like my idea for the final one. I'm like really excited to start on it, so I wanted to like make sure that this was cool. But you remember how I asked a couple classes ago if it was cool for me to expand on the documentary Destination Fear and like critically engage with it? Is that also open-ended where I can kind of like Google some different ways that I can critically engage with it, you know, find some scholarly sources, like try to like just mash them all together and have fun with it? Or like, is there a specific way you want me to critically engage with it?
When I say critically examine, all I mean is to ask questions of and answer questions about
Yeah, got
the
it.
idea
Okay.
you've chosen. That is literally all I mean. You know, there's
Okay.
there's no one critical analysis method, right? It's just like, what do we
Yeah.
do? We ask questions and we try to answer them. That's it. That's all there
Yeah.
is to it, right?
There's so many questions on Google that I could like play with and like kind of add in. So I was just wondering if you had your own way that you preferred us to do that, or like if we could just kind of like, as long as we're doing it like properly, how we've been taught, like academically, you know, using proper sources and everything.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to focus on that documentary and like on ghosts and just kind of like pick them apart. And for my own learning as well, like to try to like
Yeah.
debunk them for myself in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like and the way I want you to do it, like my way is for you to find your way to do
Okay.
this, right?
Okay, good to know.
You know, because
Awesome.
you're all
Thank you.
people. Yeah, you're welcome. No, you're all people. You're not all a bunch of robots. Like your essays, your responses should be a little different. They should contain your own anecdotes and remarks and points of experience and whatnot. Yes, Carol. So like Chat GPT as a translator is okay. That's fine. Conrad, I would not do this. Because you shouldn't need to. Like, yeah, you shouldn't need to do that. You, if you think of the mind as a muscle, you want to exercise it, right? If thought is a muscle, you need to take it to the gym. You know, you could go for a bike ride, or you could take an Uber. Using ChatGPT is taking the Uber, but you want to go for a bike ride. See the sights, think the thoughts, breathe the air, work those mental muscles. That's why I discourage that, right? Because, and also, I don't think you need ChatGPT. I think you guys are very capable of coming up with topics to talk about. You just have to pick what really interests you. The ideas you keep coming back to and thinking about over and over again, that's what you want to write about, right? Because that's what gets you excited, right? So that's my advice. Anything else? Okay. All right, good. Well, we're ending pretty early, a little early, but that's fine. Gotta go to that dentist and hopefully leave with most of my teeth. So I'll see you all next time. Oh man, my dentist is always on me about flossing. Yeah, I gotta floss more. Flossing is important for gum health, everyone. So thank you. I'll see you all next time. Okay, have a great rest of your day, and don't sweat the assignment too much. I get the impression from all the questions I'm getting that there's maybe some overthinking happening. Don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. We're just asking and answering questions, right? So I'll see you all next time, and I look forward to reading your responses, as does Jenna, I'm sure. So take care, everyone, and see you on Thursday.